Welcome to Good Vibrations, episode 233. So the episode is with Mike Williams, aka Sage of Quay, and normally when we get together we talk about the music industry and specifically the Beatles and Paul McCartney. But there was none of that this time around. We got into spiritual matters, metaphysical stuff, and we addressed some of the biggest questions in life that you can ask, such as, what is life? What are any of us doing here? What is here? What is it all about? Not the sort of stuff you normally hear discussed around the water cooler at work. I hope you get a lot out of this. I found this to be an amazing conversation with Mike Williams. Let's get into it. So it's welcome back to a previous guest on today's show who's been on quite a few times, and I think his first appearance was around about 2014, which is very early days for Good Vibrations. I just got going then. And we've had many discussions, most of which have been about the music industry, specifically the Beatles and specifically Paul McCartney or whoever he is. But we're not talking about that stuff today. We're going to have a different kind of conversation. I hope people find it refreshing and enlightening and fulfilling. So welcome back to Mike Williams, aka Sage of Quay. Welcome back, Mike.
Mark, thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure.
And I hope that you'll find it cathartic yourself to step away from all that heavy, sort of dense music industry conspiracy stuff and have more of a higher minded conversation today, because I want to take it into sort of spiritual, metaphysical realms. And I'm certainly going to find some value in doing that. And I hope you do as well along the way.
I'm beatled out, so this is a great time to talk about something else, especially when we're talking about higher level stuff.
Exactly. And you've been doing a ton of shows lately. I've seen you everywhere. Jay Widener's show, Amanda McLeod. You've been on Crow 777. You've been everywhere, man. Busy.
Well, the requests just came in, and I am not one to do a lot of interviews, Mark. I like to just do my research and put it out on my channel. So, I've declined interviews in the past, and I tell folks not to take it personally. It's just because it's not something that I really look forward to doing. I really don't. I'd rather just put my stuff up and go about my day. But, I felt maybe it was time to catch up with a few people and have the discussions.
Sure. Yeah, I feel pretty much the same about it. I get a lot of requests and sometimes I have to turn them down just because there's so much else to do. I love the fact that you've got a room full of guitars behind you and I've got a room full of records and CDs. It says so much about our past, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, music is a huge part of my life, as I know it is with yours.
Yep, we're music guys. But I think we're also higher consciousness guys, which is what we want to talk about today, because one aspect of your work, which people might not be familiar with, and I hope I get this right, is that you have a past, and I think you still do it, as a hypnotherapist and a past life regressionist. Is that correct?
Well, I retired from the practice. I was in private practice for 12 years. And the practice opened up in mid-2010. And I retired this past September 1st of 2022 for 12 years. So as you know, Mark, I was in the corporate world for over 30 years, and my hypnotherapy practice was my second career. And I was board certified with the International Association of Counselors and Therapists, and I was also a member of the National Guild of Hypnotists. So I got into hypnotherapy, going back to, the way it really started was I read a book going back to 2009, and the book was titled Memories of the Afterlife, and it was by Michael Newton, and I didn't know who Michael Newton was at the time. And I was looking on Amazon for books on near-death experience. I was always intrigued by NDEs. And so the book was a pre-order, and Amazon said, hey, we see you looking for NDEs. You might like this book. So I took a look at it. I read the synopsis. It was about reincarnation and past lives. And I thought, well, this might be interesting. I mean, I knew what reincarnation was, but I just never really dug into it. And so I got the book about, 2 or 3 weeks later. And within 3 nights, I had read the entire book. It was 30-something case studies of hypnotherapists who were doing the work that I actually ended up doing because of that book. And these were submissions of, the best of the best of past life sessions and the lessons that were learned from these sessions. And after I got done reading the book, I thought to myself, well, you know what? this is just fascinating stuff. And I need to go get my own session. So I went and I ended up driving 2 hours to the coast of North Carolina out to Wilmington. And I had a past life regression on a Thursday. And I stayed over in a hotel because of the 2 hour drive. And the next day I had a between lives session. And I can explain the difference when we get there. And the sessions were game changers for me. They just really opened me up, and I experienced things that just made huge shifts in my life. So as I was driving home from having the sessions, I had a 2 hour drive home, I thought, I've got to do this work. This is just unbelievable, just fascinating. And so I connected with the practitioner that facilitated my sessions. And I asked her, I said, do you know of any good schools? And she said to me, well, as a matter of fact, I do. She goes, I teach. And so her name is Brenda. And I took the course in early 2010. I was fully certified by June of 2010. I was very ambitious. I moved through the course and the material very quickly. And I also ended up training and instructing with Brenda for almost 10 years. So not only did I have my practice, but I was a certified hypnosis instructor as well. And it was some of the best work between the sessions themselves and the teaching that I've ever participated with in my life, because it was very fulfilling. You're helping people, and there's nothing better than helping folks.
Is there a difference between a hypnotist and a hypnotherapist?
Well, legally, like here in the United States, there is a difference from a legal perspective. So in some states, you're not allowed to use the term hypnotherapist because it implies therapy, which is governed by the Board of Psychiatry in each individual state. So in certain states, you have to use the term hypnotist. Other states don't have that distinction. You can call yourself a hypnotherapist and they don't care. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is the term hypnotherapist implies that there is work that's being done to resolve inner conflict, to help people with things like releasing weight, stop smoking, vaping, to help them to get off drugs, help them with self-confidence, public speaking, stress, pain, all of that. But hypnotist in some people's minds brings them to stage acts, the stage hypnotist. So that's a delineation that we would I don't want to say battle, but it's something we would contend with when we spoke to people, because sometimes you would get the phone call and they say, are you going to make me bark like a dog? I said, well, not unless you want to. So I preferred hypnotherapist, because hypnotherapist was saying that we're going to be doing work in the session that's going to help you to resolve conflict. It's not going to be a watch going back and forth or staring into a spiral or doing any of that stuff.
So is hypnosis necessary to do a past life regression? Is that the method that you use to get people into that state?
Yeah. So you have 4 basic trance states. You have beta, which is your waking state; alpha, which is the first lower brain frequency state. That's where you would relax if you're watching a movie, watching the TV, driving in your car, and not realizing that you weren't paying attention for the last mile or so. That's called highway hypnosis. You drop into an alpha state.
I do that for about 20 miles.
Yeah. There you go. So you're on autopilot. Theta is the next brainwave state. That's where we want to conduct hypnosis sessions and also past lives. But with past lives and between lives, you want to get the client into a very deep theta state. So each of these brainwave states, they have a range, right, measured in hertz. When you're doing a past life or between lives, you have to be very, very deep. And then below that is delta, and delta is sleep. So you obviously don't want your client in sleep. So we want to keep them in the theta. You can get work done from a clinical perspective, clinical hypnosis, which would be like stop smoking, releasing weight, managing stress and pain, public speaking, self-esteem, all of that in alpha state, the lighter trance state. But it will require more sessions because of the lighter trance state. The deeper that the client goes, the more work they can get done.
Are there lots of charlatans in the game, or are there people with malevolent intent that might want to hypnotize somebody for, not good means? And how would someone find a good hypnotherapist?
Yeah, so there's going to be bad apples and charlatans in every line of work. I have to say that having been in that business for 12 years, maybe there was one that I had heard about based upon input that came to me from clients that stopped going there and said, hey, I'm going to come to you. But what was the other question you had? Oh, how to find a good hypnotherapist.
How to find a reputable one, yeah.
Yeah. So what you want to do is look for hypnotherapists that have been around a while and connected into very reputable associations. So as an example, here in the United States, we have the International Association of Counselors and Therapists, and also the National Guild of Hypnotists. So these are two prominent associations. And to belong to these associations, you have to be in good standing. You have ongoing education credits that are required, especially with the IAC, the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. And whenever you contact a potential hypnotherapist, it's very important to ask them the extent of their work. In other words, how many clients do they have a week? What is their range of, or their portfolio of work that they work with? Some are very narrow, like some will only work on smoking and weight, whereas other hypnotherapists have a much broader portfolio of services that they bring to the table. But it's very important to speak to them, to understand how much work they're doing, what type of work they do, and whether they're certified, and what are their associations.
So I've got some big questions for you today, Mike. I'm going to forewarn you, this is not a fluffy, disposable kind of show. This is going to be a heavy show, not in terms of dense information, but in terms of big questions that I want to get your take on. And to kick off, since time immemorial, humans have tried to figure out what the meaning is of these lives that we find ourselves in. And all kinds of interpretations have been put on it. But it is the biggest question we can ever have. What are we? What is this place? What are we doing here? What is the point of it all? It's a pretty big question to kick off with, but is there any straightforward way in which you can give your take on those questions?
You're here, first and foremost, for soul development. So when you incarnate, you come to Earth, you are coming to a classroom of much higher education. Earth is extremely challenging. And that's why many, many souls decide to incarnate here. Because by doing so, the array of experiences that are going to be had is going to contribute to the soul's learning. And that is what the soul is in the game for. The soul is in the game to develop and to move higher up the ladder of consciousness, of wisdom, ultimately to enlightenment. And I distinguish between a soul and a spirit. A spirit would be a liberated soul. So a spirit would be a soul that has achieved its goals as far as its development and now is completely free. So, but that's the answer. The answer is you come here, you incarnate here to learn.
Yeah, that's the explanation that makes the most sense to me of all the ones that I've heard. I've looked at what various religions have to say and various mystery school teachings and such. And that is the explanation which resonates the most with me, and it answers a lot of questions. But within that dynamic, we obviously undergo a memory wipe when we incarnate each time. So we can't remember what we did in previous lives. There seem to be methods of regaining that knowledge through past life regressions and such. But generally speaking, we get that memory wipe. And people might ask, what's the point of that if every time we reincarnate, we have to start again with a blank sheet of paper and try and figure it all out all over again without the benefit of the knowledge we've already built up from several past lives? What do you think about that?
Yeah. So the reason why you have amnesia when you come in is because if you didn't, you would operate like a robot. So with the unknowing, you're entering into the life with a blank sheet of paper, brand new. But when you come into the life, you do have a curriculum. And let me just explain this to the audience. I was in practice for 12 years. 50% of my practice was clinical work, and the other 50% was spiritually oriented, past lives and between lives. And I did 200, maybe 250 past life and between lives sessions combined. When you do this work, what you understand is there is a process, because when the clients come in and you get them into trance and you take them into a past life or you take them into a between lives session, what you get back as the practitioner is you getting an understanding that there is a process to all of this. This is not haphazard. It's not willy-nilly. So when you have that large a sampling of people coming back with very, very similar reporting about how it works and what goes on, you begin to understand that there is a pattern, there is a process to all of this. I just want to say that, all right? Because along with having my own past life sessions and my own between live sessions, I facilitated, 200 to 250. I mean, at least. And that's just spiritual sessions. That has nothing to do with the clinical piece of it. So when you come in, you have to come in to experience the dynamics of this particular incarnation with no real knowledge of past lives, because if you had the whole thing in front of you, in other words, you knew the score before you got in, then what would be the purpose of coming into the life? You would already know what twists and turns would come. You would already know what the dynamics are. You would already know what your different personal interactions with other people, your family would be. And so you would go about it in a rote, robotic way.
Right.
So that's why you come in with, quote, amnesia. Now, the thing, though, is this. What we lack, or what most people lack, is an ability to connect into higher levels of consciousness. Most people only think in terms of the five senses. That's it. That's their reality. They don't learn. And if they learn, many don't have the discipline to connect into the higher levels. So through meditation, through past life regression, those types of activities. So the thing is, there is a way to make that connection. And what folks have to understand is that when you come into this particular realm, this particular simulation, I'll get into that in a little bit. This world is meant to take your soul's hands off the steering wheel and hand it off to somebody else. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to get you to give up your authority and to disempower yourself. So instead of you driving your car, they take your hands off it and they move you to the passenger seat or they move you to the back seat. That's what you have to understand about this particular realm that we're in, this reality, whatever you want to call it. That's what it's about. Now, the soul's responsibility is to recognize that you never give up the steering wheel. You don't give it up. You must keep your hands on it. Because as soon as you take your hands off that steering wheel, somebody else is driving your life. Somebody else is driving your experiences. And because of that, in all likelihood, you're going to have challenges and experiences in your life that maybe weren't supposed to happen, because not everything is dictated. Like you'll hear some of the new age stuff come down and say that everything is scripted out. You're where you're always supposed to be. Everything that happens to you is supposed to happen to you. And I don't subscribe to that, Mark. I don't subscribe to that based upon the work that I've done, not only from the sessions that I've done, but also through my own personal research into metaphysics. You are the driver of your life, and you're the one with the will. You have to apply your will. As soon as you relinquish, then you no longer have your will. You're actually now enabling the will of somebody else. And in this case, at a higher level here, it would be the will that's being imposed on us by the controlling apparatus that is in play.
So would you say these lives are an interplay between that which has been decreed and pre-planned on a soul level and spontaneous elements that come along during our life paths?
Yes.
Is it an interplay between those two dynamics?
Yes. You come down with a curriculum, right? So before you incarnate, you have an understanding of what the lessons are in this life, what it is you're supposed to learn.
You agree to it, right? You
You agree to
consent
it.
on a
You
soul
agree
level.
to it, right? So you agree to it, and that agreement, the lesson plan, the curriculum is drawn up between you as a soul, and you have guides. And at certain points in time, you have a primary guide, and that primary guide might only be in play for a part of your life, and then another guide will step in. But typically, what I have found through my work is there's a guide, a spirit guide that is with you through an entire incarnation. So when you're up in the spirit world, the lesson plan and the curriculum is drawn up. These are the things that the soul has to learn, or that the soul has to continue to learn. Because the other thing is that many of the lessons that we learn as a soul take multiple lifetimes. It's not just you come into one lifetime, you learn this, and then, okay, done, and that piece of it is over. There are patterns. So souls will come in, and because they haven't mastered a particular lesson in one lifetime, it'll then roll into a second lifetime, or a third lifetime, or a fourth lifetime, or a fifth lifetime. It depends upon the soul in the physical form, how quickly the soul can recall what the plan is all about and make decisions accordingly. It goes back to what I was saying before. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. So it is an interplay. So what I'm saying is when you come down, you have a curriculum, you have a lesson plan, but it is not dictated like you will do this on this day, you will do this on that hour. It doesn't work that way.
It's not like the Beatles' Bible.
No, yeah, no, nothing like that. So your job as a soul when you come in is to manifest that lesson with all of the multitudes of variables that are going to be thrown in your way. So the quickest way to get to a point is a straight line from A to B, right? It would be wonderful if we came in as souls and we just drew that straight line. I came in, I'm born, here's point A, point B is here, and straight line, learned everything, good, next lesson, let's do it. What happens though is because there is that interplay, the line is kind of zigzaggy. And maybe, like I said, because of that, you don't hit everything that you were supposed to learn in a particular life. And that'll mean that it carries over into another life in order to pick up where you left off.
So you can work your way up the ladder life by
Yes.
accumulating lessons. So it's a bit like snakes and ladders, I guess. You can get really high up the scale, and then maybe you can make some really big mistake, which plunges you back down to a lower level, and you have to work your way back up again.
And that could happen. That could happen where you make progress and then you backslide. But for souls that have a lot of lessons behind them, we might refer to them as the older souls. What I have found is that typically does not happen. Older souls have been around the block. And the older souls, if we talk about this reality right now that we're experiencing, those of us who've been around have pierced the veil. We can see what's going on. We're the ones that are trying to expose the deception, expose the lies. What happens is, and I know we'll get into this, I'll just touch on this a little bit. I don't want to get ahead of you here. The degree in which you do not learn your lessons means that when you pass away and it's time to incarnate again, you're going to have to go through the same door you went through the last time. In other words, you're going to cycle through again because you didn't learn the important lessons that you were supposed to come down and learn. So you pass away, you go back to the spirit world, and then when it's time to incarnate again, there's one door. And then you say to your guide, well, geez, that looks like the same door as last time. And he's going to say, well, actually, it is. So the curriculum is going to be the same. It'll be a different life, obviously. It'll be different interactions, but the lessons are the same. So you'll have to go back down again and give it another shot. For those who make progress and understand what this reality is all about, when they pass away and they go to the spirit world, what they'll find is that there won't be just that one door. There'll be maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 doors. And why is that? It's because you learned the lessons, or at least a significant portion of the lessons, which allows you as a soul to move to different opportunities which are higher levels of learning. So it's complicated A lot of people like to just make it very black and white, but it's not. It's extremely dynamic and it's complex. Trying to explain it is not easy all the time because people just want, they just want hey, just can you put it in a box and slap a big bow on it and make it really easy and simple, and make me feel good. Well,
Yeah, they want that with the McCartney stuff as well, don't they?
yeah. I mean, everybody wants the simple thing. They want to feel good, right? They don't want to think. They don't want to philosophize. They don't want to be introspective on anything.
Right.
But the thing is, folks, you're here because it's a spiritual journey. The physical incarnation is just a way that the soul goes about its soul development, its learning process. We've chosen to do this.
With those 5 doors that you said would be available to you in that example that you gave, and you have the option of going into either of them, does the option also exist on that soul level to say, I'm good, thanks. I don't want to go back. I've learnt enough. I want to stay where I am.
Yeah. So you do have the option of saying, hey, I don't think so. And, or not right now, or, I just need a break or whatever. But the thing is, what'll happen is there'll be discussions. You'll be having discussions with your guides and maybe even with your elders where they're going to say, okay, look, we understand that you don't want to do this again, or you need a break and so on. But understand that one way or another, these lessons have got to be mastered. You've got to be able to graduate. Okay. So it's up to you if you want to not do that, because there's another misconception out there that souls are perfect, and souls are not perfect, because if souls were perfect, they wouldn't incarnate to learn lessons. And but who put the whole lesson plan thing in play? Why is that? Well, the creator, source, God decided to do that for reasons that pertain to God's ways of doing things, So I don't really get into too much about questioning that. It's just the way it is. I mean, it's just is.
Well, I've heard David Icke put it in a certain way. A phrase that he used, which stayed with me, was, "There's no being with a machine gun in the spirit world saying get into that body and incarnate into that world or else." So
Yeah.
it's voluntary, it's consensual.
Yes, it is.
That was the point here.
It is. It is. But there's still the lessons that have to be learned. So it's going to be up to the soul to determine whether they want to incarnate again or how soon they want to incarnate. But the lessons are still there. Now, are there other ways to go about the lessons? There are other ways to go about the lessons. When I did the work, people had past lives in other worlds, in other realities. So they would go there. It wasn't necessarily Earth as we know it. So even though there's no gun to your head telling you that you have to do it, ultimately what happens is, if you want to progress as a soul, you're going to have to do the work. You have to do it. It's like anything in life. If you want to achieve something, you have to work at it. You have to have intention, and you have to make it kinetic in order for things to manifest. Nothing's going to manifest whether you're in physical form or you're in your soul essence if you do nothing. And that's what folks have to understand. It takes work.
Are you familiar with the song by Howard Jones called Hide and Seek? Do you know that one?
No.
I think I may have sent you the lyrics some years ago. I've got a vague recollection of that, but I've just called up the lyrics here, and I think it's worth me just reading these out because it's an incredible song. It was a hit in the 80s. It's a pop record by this synth pop artist, Howard Jones. But Howard evidently studied Eastern mysticism, and he put some of his knowledge into some of his song lyrics, and they really slipped under the radar because these songs were played on the radio, but most people didn't pay attention to the lyrics. And in the song Hide and Seek, he's talking about the Creator, the Most High, splitting itself into an infinite number of individuated units of consciousness and coming into this reality to experience itself. And it has to be split into these many different units to have the widest variety of different experiences as is possible. So the song starts, There was a time when there was nothing at all, just a distant hum. There was a being, and he lived on his own. He had no one to talk to and nothing to do. He drew up the plans, learnt to work with his hands. 1,000,000 years passed by, and his work was done. And his words were these: hope you find it in everything that you see, which is the chorus. But then you go to the second verse, and he says, so she had built her elaborate home. So we've gone from he to she, because it's recognizing the oneness of divinity, which has not been split into duality. Duality only exists in this realm. So she had built her elaborate home with its ups and downs, its rains and its sun. She decided that her work was done, time to have fun, and she found a game to play. Then, as part of the game, she completely forgot where she'd hidden herself, and she spent the rest of her time trying to find the parts. Those are incredible lyrics to me, and I think they do address what we're talking about here.
Yes, exactly. It's really an allegory about what we were just talking about. So the thing is, everybody has to understand that you have God in you. You have that divine spark in you. And this particular reality, this realm, looks to put that flame out. And that's the challenge, right? So the challenge is to understand that you are a divine being. You're not just, this flesh and bones. This is just a vehicle, folks. That's what it is. It's a vehicle that animates and sparks when your soul comes in to interact with this school and to learn your lessons. But never forget that you have the creator in you. And that's why it's very important to make that connection back to source, back to your divine. And you'd be amazed at how much of your life will improve and get better, how much better of an understanding or understanding you will have if you have the disciplines to make that connection.
Have you seen the movie Cloud Atlas?
No.
That's a
I have
great
a lot
one.
of no's, huh?
Sorry?
I have a lot of no's.
Well,
books and shows.
You got some homework for later. This movie comes from the Wachowskis, who did The Matrix and V for Vendetta.
Okay.
But they do actually encode a lot of truth and a lot of knowledge into their movies, I've found, into the narratives of it. So Cloud Atlas is based on a novel which came earlier. And it's got 6 different timelines, which range from, I think it's the 1850s, all the way through to 2 futuristic timelines. One of them is, 200 years into the future or something like that. And you have the same actors in each of these timelines. Tom Hanks is in it. He's the main character. Halle Berry is in it. And there's various others. And you see them popping up in these different timelines because they're reincarnated souls. It's the same soul going through a new lifetime. And you can see how some of the characters have learnt their lessons. And so they progress up the scale and they have better experiences in life. And then others go the other way. They slip backwards and don't learn those lessons. There's Hugo Weaving in it, who was Agent Smith in The Matrix. And he goes from being this sort of villainous character in one of the early timelines to becoming a demon. He's an actual friggin' demon at the end of it because he's slipped so far into negativity. So again, that's another great allegory for these lives that we find ourselves in. And there's a lot to be learned from looking at the different timelines and what happens to the characters as they progress through them. Great movie.
Yeah. So another series, not a movie, but a series that touches on what this is all about is Westworld. So
see, I've never seen that one, so that's my homework.
Okay. So if you watch Westworld, there's different worlds you can enter into. There's Westworld, there's Rome world, there's this world, that world. And so you choose what experience it is that you would like to experience. What Westworld is telling the audience is that's how it works. So as a soul, you decide what experiences you need from a developmental perspective and what is the world or the reality or the realm or the simulation that you're going to incarnate into that's going to bring those experiences to you. See, when I was doing the work, what happened was I was doing a session. This is going back years ago. And during that session, this person went back to, I guess, the 1920s or 30s or so. That was their past life. And then they came in again to have another session, and then they went to Rome. And once they got to the spirit world, what happens is they meet up with their guide, and I can also ask the guide questions. I have to ask the soul. I said, is it okay? Ask your guide if it's okay if I ask a couple of questions. And of course, they always say yes. And so the question was, are past lives linear? Right. So is the life that she came in for, the past life that took her back to the 1920s, was that the immediate past life? Because, we're in the 2000s now, right? And the answer was no. It's because what we do is we enter into different experiences based upon what our soul needs as far as development goes. I hope I'm making sense. So what I'm saying is the 1920s life that this person came into was not the prior past life. It was the one in Rome. So this gets kind of weird for a lot of people, right? That's why I said it's like Westworld. As soon as I started watching Westworld, because of the work that I was doing, I thought to myself, well, there you go. And it was also explained to me this way. So I told you, Mark, I've had my own sessions, deep trance, past lives, between lives, and you make that connection into the spirit world. There's a whole other existence in the spirit world. And people who can't grasp this, my question to them is, you exist here in this world right now. How did you get here? How did it start? What's it all about? What is it all about? When you think about it, it's mind-boggling. So if you can have an existence here, why is it that you can't have an existence someplace else? As an example, in the spirit world, what was shown to me is there were these flat screen TVs, and there was like 10 of them in this classroom. And before a soul comes into an incarnation, especially new souls, they have to go through extensive schooling and training to understand emotions. So as part of the education system in the spirit world, they enter into these simulations as part of a classroom environment. And let's say they need to understand real hurt, pain, that type of feeling, that really painful stuff. Well, they have to understand and learn what that feels like before they get here. So souls go through training and education to learn that. But the way they did that was to go into different simulations, different realities during the classroom to learn that. Now, the point I'm making is that's how it works overall. So the classroom is taking them through these different realities. They can choose, I want to be out in the United States in the West in the 1800s. Oh, no, I want to be in Egypt. You know what? Let me go into the 1920s, the Roaring '20s. So they are picking and choosing where they want to go to have that experience. And that's how it works overall. Now, the reason why the training is required is because when a new soul comes into, let's say they incarnate here into Earth, into this realm of this reality, if they don't have that training behind them, it's going to be catastrophic for them, because a new soul is coming from the spirit world where all of this garbage that we deal with down here doesn't exist. Hatred, violence, dark stuff doesn't exist in the spirit world. So you have to be informed when you come down. What I have found through my work is souls that commit suicide. It's not in all cases, but generally speaking, they are souls that were here for the first or second time. They got here and they just could not function. They couldn't deal with it. Even though they had the training, it wasn't enough. So they take their lives. The thing is, though, when that happens, the soul goes back to the spirit world. There is a life review. And then the guides and your elders will say, hey, look, we got to make another run at this. You can't just cut your life short and make the trip back home. You've got to do this. So there are going to be folks out there that are going to clearly not agree with me. And that's okay. It's like the way I look at this is that I did this for a long time. And I facilitated a lot of sessions, and I had my own sessions, and I had the experience for myself. And I'm confident from where I'm coming from that this is how it works.
What about the likes of, let's take as an example, Klaus Schwab or Bill
Yeah.
Gates? Obviously, incredibly evil people, psychopaths, doing great harm, great damage to so many people in this realm. On a spirit soul level, is there a sense in which they could actually be doing us a favor by facilitating our life lessons? So we need evil, we need darkness, we need these challenges in these lives to progress. Without these experiences, our souls wouldn't be evolving the way they need to. So is there a sense in which, from a higher minded perspective, because as flesh and blood humans, the inclination is towards demonizing the likes of Schwab and Gates. Certainly I do in my thoughts towards them. But when we reach a higher state of consciousness, do you think there's a sense in which we might be able to look at these individuals and see that they actually helped many of us in our life journeys?
That's absolutely part of the dynamic. So this world is all about duality. So how are you going to learn justice if you don't experience injustice? How are you going to know what love feels like if you don't experience hate? It goes down that path. So the duality piece of this is very, very important. So are we learning from these people? Well, you should be learning from these people because it goes back to what I was saying earlier, Mark. These are the people that have come into this reality that are or have the role of peeling your hands off the steering wheel. And for those that allow it, that's a backsliding event, in my opinion. For those that don't allow it, for those that are pushing back and understand that this is wrong, that's forward progress. Now, some people will say, well, everything's a lesson, even when you don't learn your lesson. And that's true. Everything is a lesson. But the point being is, did you learn the lessons you came down to learn? You could say, oh, well, the lesson I learned was I didn't learn my lesson. The curriculum that I came down to learn, I didn't progress on that. Okay, yeah, but that's not a great thing. Okay, that's like a C minus if you're in school, maybe even a D. You want to be able to take a look at what's being presented by the Schwabs, by the Bill Gates, by the Faucis, and you want to be able to understand what's going on there. Remember, this goes to what I was saying before. If you don't get it, when you pass away and you incarnate, you back up to the spirit world, there's that one door. You do it all over again. For those that get it, there'll be more opportunities available to the soul the next time you have to incarnate or there's another learning experience that you're going to take on. So as an example, if you awaken this much, there might be 2 doors available to you. If you awaken this much, 3 doors. If you awaken, then, 5 doors, 6 doors, 10 doors. That's the way it works. Souls do not progress at the same rate and pace. As I mentioned before, souls are not perfect. Although if they were, then we wouldn't be doing any of this. So yes, to answer your question, the role that they're playing, is it beneficial from the perspective of learning from the duality? The answer is yes. Does it mean you have to like it? It doesn't mean you have to accept it. In fact, the point is to not like it and not accept it because that's what keeps your hands on your steering wheel and keeps you in control of your life here.
Well, the mantra that you hear within natural law can be simplified as do no harm, but take no shit, right? So that's the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. So we're not supposed to tolerate evil, and we're supposed to oppose the likes of Fauci and Schwab and Gates and all the rest of them. So that's part of the lesson that we come here to learn and the experiences that we undergo. But when these psychopathic abominations pass over, they're going to have a life review, the same as everyone else does. And they're going to be absolutely horrific because these life reviews are going to show them how their actions, their behaviors impacted on so many others. And they're going to feel it from their perspective. They're going to have to empathize with, the effects of their actions. So I wonder what happens to their souls after that. because they're going to look back on their life and think, my God, look what I did. Look at the harm and the damage that I caused. Is there any kind of retribution or punishment for that, would you say? I mean, I mentioned earlier that this phrase of David Icke's, where he says there's no God forcing you to get into one of these meat suits and come and incarnate down here. But I wonder if those souls will choose to come back and maybe suffer themselves and undergo some hardship similar to what they've inflicted on others. It's tempting to want to think of some sort of punishment or retribution for these individuals. Certainly is for me, and I know many other people will feel that way as well.
Yeah, so this gets a little complicated because not all souls wind up back home in the spirit world. And I'll explain. So for those that head home, they go to the light, and then we'll talk about this in a bit, and did things that were not good, dark things, evil things, then yes, there's going to be a life review, and there's going to be karma. It's the law of cause and effect. So the next time they incarnate, they could very well come back into a life where now they are the recipients of the types of behavior that they inflicted in a previous life. And so they're going to have to go through that. Now, those are for the souls that are doing bad things today. And when they pass away, they go to the light. Why do I say for those? Because some of those souls will not go to the light. There are different realms and dimensions in the unseen world. That's where they will head. Why is that? It's because the soul still has its own will. And there are souls that will decide not to go to the light. We've all heard the term earthbound. Souls that are earthbound. They didn't go to the light. They didn't go home. They can go home if they want to, but they've decided not to do that.
Right.
So we also have to make a distinction between, because I hear this a lot, what they don't understand is the quote gods of this world or this realm or this reality are not the gods in the spirit world. First of all, they're not the creator God. That's number one. And they think of them as the gods that manage this school, this experience right now. That's what they are. Your soul transcends that. So when I pass away, when you pass away, Mark, we're going home. We're going to the spirit world. We're going back to where we belong. But there are other souls that won't do that. And so they wind up staying within the realm, this darker, denser realm where some souls decide that they're going to play, where they're going to stay in the afterlife.
We've got to talk about the soul trap idea. I think that's probably going to be my last question to you. We'll finish up on that one. But I told you I had some heavy questions for you. Let me just pull up the other one that I wanted to put to you. So suffering and hardship seem to be the default position in the world right now. And I personally know so many friends who are basically good people. They are trying to help others. They're trying to put knowledge and wisdom and guidance into the world. They're trying to live according to right action. These are people that I know personally. I know a lot of people since I've engaged myself in this work. I've gone to conferences and meetup groups and stuff. I know so many people now. And pretty much everyone that I know who is trying to put good work into the world and make this world a better place is suffering. They've got some kind of suffering in their lives. Differs from person to person, but there does seem to be a direct correlation between the amount of good work you put in the world and how hard you try to live according to right action and the amount of suffering that you reap as a result.
Yeah.
So this could cause someone of a cynical mindset to conclude that God, the creator God, is not this benevolent, loving being, but is actually some sort of sick sadist that gets off on seeing people suffer. I'm not saying that's my personal viewpoint, but others have commented to me that they've come round to that way of thinking. So when good people go out of their way to do good work, but only reap suffering and hardship as a result, what's going on there? Or is this a symptom of life in the 2020s now, because this world is so different now to how it's ever been before? Is this a dynamic that's ramping up now? And do you know people in your own personal life who are suffering great hardships but are trying to do the right thing? I'm just trying to make
Yeah.
sense of this whole.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we have to look at it from a higher level. It's so important. So I understand that there are people that are trying to do good things, and the more good they try to do or try to implement, the harder life can get for them. So without trying to sound cavalier, that's part of the lessons to be learned here. What is it like to operate with a good heart, a pure heart, in a place that is dark? Think about that. What's it like? It's like trying to move a mountain sometimes. It seems like it's just hopeless. It's hopeless. I can't move this mountain. What I try to explain to folks is, and this is something that I used to do when I was in my practice, whenever you have something that is very, very difficult, something that's very, very traumatic, whether it be emotionally, mentally, physically, think about it in terms as not as the glass being half empty, but look at it as half full. So ask yourself this question. Even though I've gone through very difficult times and very challenging times, very, very challenging, what benefits came from it? What did I learn from it? Did I find that I was stronger than I thought I was? Did I find that I was more resilient than I thought I was? Did it make me make changes in my life that I otherwise would not have thought about before? These are the things that we have to think through. We have to understand that in the scope of soul development, this life that you're living right now, which is very important, is a blip on the radar as far as your soul's overall developmental program. That's how we have to look at it. And also you have to understand that first and foremost, this is an individual journey. This is not about collective. This is not about community first. And let me explain, because some people are like, oh, what are you saying? Community is not important. No, it's very important. But let's understand this. You came down as an individual soul, as an individual in physical form, with lessons to learn. You have to learn your lessons first. You have to focus on your soul's development. A community is only as strong and only as resilient and only as resourceful as its individual members. If you have weak individuals, you will have a weak community. And this is what the controllers have done. The controllers understand this. This is why they focus on collective and community first, and they never talk about the individual. In fact, the individual is vilified. That's how I try to explain it to folks, Mark. It's for those that say, hey, this is very difficult. You've got to take a step back. I used to have clients come into me and say, Mike, my life is so challenging. It's upside down. My relationships are terrible. My financial situation is a horror show. And so they would want to go into a past life to help them to understand, make the connections. Because what will happen is you take them back to a past life that sets the table for them to understand why it is they're going through what they're going through in this life. And it brings the bigger picture into play for them. And once they understand the bigger picture, there is then a different way to approach your issues. If you're going to approach your issues myopically and look at it from a very narrow aperture, then you're limiting your ability to be creative, to work your way out of a lot of those issues and challenges. You have to widen the aperture. Is it easy? Absolutely not. It's not easy. See, that's the thing. A lot of people want things to be easy. They just want, hey, just tell me what to do. Just knock me on the head with a magic wand and make it better. Point me in the right direction. Do I need to go left or right? And the thing is, there are no easy answers. It goes back to making that connection back to who you really are. You're divine. You're a divine soul. You've got to go back and make that connection. Because if you don't make that connection, then you're walking around lost. You're walking around without a compass. I had to learn the hard way, Mark. This wasn't always my way of operating. When I had my awakening, there was a lot of things I had to learn. There was a lot of things that I was doing wrong. There was a lot of things that I was invested in that I should not have been investing in. And you just make changes. Sometimes the changes happen quickly. Sometimes it takes time. But ask yourself, as tough a time as you're going through, what am I learning from this? Am I stronger? Am I more resilient? Is there something about myself that I now understand that I didn't understand before? These are questions you have to ask yourself.
What's frustrating is when you see legions of what we would call NPC normies wandering around thinking everything's fine in the world, everything's normal, completely ignorant and profane on a spiritual level, but they're happy. They're
Yeah.
happy. They're enjoying life. Whereas these friends that I'm talking about who are trying to do the right thing in life but are suffering aren't happy. So it's very frustrating. But I guess we have to conclude that those normies that are wandering around with a smile on their face, thinking everything's just fine and dandy, have got a lot of spiritual progression to yet go through. Whereas these friends who are suffering so much are much further ahead of them in the game. We have to keep that in mind.
The normies, they are the one door group. Okay. They're the ones they're the one door group, and they don't understand this. So they're going to be cycling through and cycling through and cycling through until they get it. Now, the other thing that we have to ponder for like folks like you and me and others that are trying to get people to wake up is it even possible to change this realm? In other words, perhaps it is exactly as it is supposed to be. In other words, when you enter into this reality, that's why I take it back to Westworld. So if you watch the Westworld series, if you go into Westworld, that's the world you decide to go in, you're in Westworld. And it's going to play out according to the program, according to the quote simulation. And people ask, are you saying it's a program? Are you saying it's a simulation? I'm saying I do lean that way. I do. There's multiple realities. There's multiple realms. Going back to what I was saying before is what I was shown as to how it works with the TV screens. So the thing is, you have to say to yourself, okay, well, if this is a classroom, let's just say you go to school and the class it's a math class. It's about calculus. It would be like going into a calculus class and saying, hey, I want this to be about biology. And, the professor or the teacher is going to look at you and say, well, biology class is down the hall, 3 doors down. This is not biology. This is calculus. Okay. So if you want biology, feel free to walk out the door and go to biology class. This is calculus. So we have to understand or bring it into our awareness, I should say, that that's a very strong possibility that at the end of the day, this, because it's a classroom, it's instructional, is not supposed to change. But that doesn't mean that we give up. It means that the reason why I do the work is to see if I can get one of those one door souls to wake up and realize that the room they're in right now has no door, right? But it's supposed to have a door. And I'm trying to show them, hey, you're in a room that thinks it has no doors, but there is a door. There's an exit door over here. So I look at, the work that I do, the work that you do, and so many others, is to get them to wake up and understand that there is a higher level of awareness, there's a higher level of consciousness that they have to become aware of. And honestly, Mark, the way I look at it is if I can affect one person, that's one person more than we had before.
I get emails pretty much every day from people saying that my work has helped them to wake up or was instrumental in their process. And I'm sure you do as well. And many, many other researchers doing this work must get the same. And that's a very fulfilling thing to get an email like that from somebody saying it was you listening to your output that set me on this path and thank you for it. That's very fulfilling on a soul level. And I think that's the idea of these lives. We've got to leave the world in a better condition than it was in before we got here. And if we can say we did that, then that's a life well lived.
Yeah. And, I want to say something too, folks. I don't think a lot of people realize this. They watch your shows, Mark, they watch my shows and other shows, and I don't think they understand what it is that we have to deal with on a daily basis as far as hatred. There's a lot of garbage and there's a lot of trash and there's a lot of hate that comes our way, folks. And I know many of you don't realize that. And I'm not saying that, you should realize that. It's because you're not a hater. And so when you watch Mark and I and others, you're taking in the material. It's food for thought. Maybe it resonates with you. Maybe it doesn't, whatever, but you're civil about it. And you come at it from a mature adult perspective. But the level of stupidity that is out there and the level of hatred and belligerence is beyond most people's comprehension because they're not putting themselves out there. Now, I'm not complaining because I'm going to continue to do what I'm doing because it's the right thing to do. And so one of my lessons in this life is to understand that that element is out there. And that element is doing everything it possibly can, as guttural as it is at times, to try to throw me off my game. The same with you, Mark, because I know you go through the same stuff.
Yeah, we all do. Anyone engaged in this work is going to attract that kind of garbage.
Right. So is it difficult? Yeah, at times it gets very difficult. But the objective is, again, Mike, do not take your hand off the steering wheel. That segment out there is trying to get me to pull off, step back, sit in the passenger seat, or even get out of the car. And this is what we're dealing with. This is why in the beginning I said this is very complex. It's not just, one size fits all, easy explanation. It's very, very complex. And the thing is, though, once we cross over, all of it makes sense. We understand the bigger picture. We understand why it is we went through what we went through. We understand the dynamics. We understand our family interactions, the relationships, all of the stuff that we went through. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because, I just wanted to share the fact that a lot of the stuff that people are going through, we go through it too.
But we pay it forward, don't we? Because with both of us, there would have been figures who were influential towards us in the early days that got us on this path. And we're now paying that forward and we're waking other people up in the same way that we were.
Right.
So it's a continual process, generation by generation. And that's the way it's supposed to be. I've got a couple of other really big questions for you.
Go ahead, ask him.
Sure. So this next question addresses a subject which I never really hear talked about on podcasts or shows. It's a really big subject, but people just don't seem to want to go there. So let me just preface it by saying that every day sees the suffering and the death of billions of living sentient beings as part of the food chain. So I'm not even talking about humans eating meat here. I'm talking about what happens in the animal kingdom in terms of certain species providing the food for certain other species in order for them to survive. So we've got an ecosystem that's been set up which consists of or relies upon the suffering and horrific death and all the fear that goes with it of billions of sentient beings. This happens every single day. Most people don't give it a thought. So sort of going back to one of my earlier questions, this could lead somebody to conclude that any kind of creator god that would put a situation like that into place must not be benevolent. So if God, quote unquote, is good by default, why is it necessary to have a food chain such as this, which causes so much pain, suffering, and death? As I say, this is a question that very few people ever seem to address, but it's one that certainly plays in the back of my mind. So all this fear and suffering and death experienced by so many of these creatures is putting low density negative vibrations into the morphic field that we're all living in. So it's not an ideal state of affairs, really, is it? I mean, it's bad enough what humans do to animals, and I personally feel that animals are here as a kind of test of our morality, of how we treat them. Didn't Gandhi make some famous quote about you can judge a society on how it treats its animals or something?
Yeah.
But I'm talking about in the natural world, species consuming other species, not even with humans involved.
Okay.
It's horrific. It's death. It's suffering. Why does that have to be the case?
It is the construct of this realm, Mark, of this simulation, this reality. It just is. It's going back to what I was saying about Westworld, right? And when you enter into Westworld, you go into, a different simulation. That's what it's about. Now, there are other realities, there are other realms that you and I will incarnate into, and in all likelihood have already incarnated into, where these types of dynamics do not exist. Animals are not eating animals. Humans aren't killing animals. Humans aren't killing humans. There is no dark apparatus, New World Order control system in place. That's it. I know it's very difficult for people to get their heads wrapped around this because we are here now and we're dealing with what we're dealing with. And it is real as real can be because it's what you're experiencing. And I also understand that there are people listening to this that might think that I'm crazy, that this is it. But all I can tell you is based upon the work that I've done, this is not it. I can tell you that there are other realities, other worlds that a soul incarnates into that is nothing like this place. And why are they in those particular realities? Why are they incarnating into those experiences? It's because that happened to be the experience that the soul decided, with the help of their guides and their elders, to incarnate into and experience as part of their developmental process. We think this is it because come in, you have the amnesia, this is what we're experiencing. It goes back to what I was saying before. You have to make that connection up to the higher realms. You have to make that divine spiritual connection. If you don't make it, then this place is just a big bucket of shit and you're swimming in it. And you have to think to yourself, but this is how I explain it to people. Do you have love in your heart? Do you love your family? Do you love your wife? Do you love your children? Do you love your animals, your pets? You have love. Where does the love come from? Does the love come from some diabolical God or from some diabolical creator? No, it does not. That love comes from the higher realms. It comes from the source creator, the spirit world. That's where it comes from. That's what it's really about, being human. You feel that love. The sheer fact that you wake up every morning and you have no intention in your heart to harm anybody, and all you want to do is do the right things and keep a roof over your children's head and do the best you possibly can for your family and your friends, that is the true God. That is the true creator. That is the spark of divinity that resides within you. And all this other stuff that people want to paint as a God, whether it be Yahweh, whether it be Lucifer, I don't subscribe to any religion, Mark, any institutionalized religion. I was born and raised Roman Catholic. I spent a number of years in a non-denominational Christian church. So I understand Catholicism and I understand Christianity. And I'm not knocking anybody, okay? But I will also tell you that these religions were put in place and commandeered to make that connection that you should have with the divine, a direct line of communication. They stuck a middleman in between with a switch to tell you what to believe, how to behave, and so on. Now, I know a lot of people right now listening to me, and they're going to be very, very upset with what I'm saying. But what I have found is that connection has got to be one-to-one. It's a direct line of communication between you and God, you and the creator, you and source, whatever name you want to give, God, creator, or source, okay?
Right.
That is the connection. So the fact that there's so many of us out there that love and understand love and want to love tells me that we transcend this place, Mark. We're here to learn. There are those souls that are old souls that have been around the block, that have come here, and perhaps they don't even have to incarnate anymore, but they did. And they did for the sole purpose of trying to shake the trees and get people to wake up so that more and more souls could pick up the rate and pace, get out of this routine that they're in, this cycle, and move on and progress to better experiences from a soul developmental perspective.
Right. I think love certainly is our default mode. And it reminds me of this speech from Charlie Chaplin in the movie The Great Dictator, which is often described as the greatest speech ever made, where he just says, I don't want to hurt or harm anyone. I would like to help people if I can. Human beings are like that. And unless you're a psychopath or you've been abused or mind controlled, that is the case for most people, I think. They just want to be left alone to live freely and to help other people if they can. But I wonder if the situation that we have with all these billions of sentient beings dying every day as part of the food chain could be as a result of the vibrational frequency that we find ourselves in, as a result of humanity taking its eyes off the road or its hands off the wheel and allowing this so-called elite class of psychopathic demons to take control of this realm, as they clearly have been for such a long time. And we're seeing that all come to a head now, very demonstrably. But I wonder if it's because of humanity's lack of care collectively, whereby this class has been allowed to put all its evil and darkness into the world, which has created a scenario where all this death and destruction and suffering happens as a direct result of that. It's a dynamic which has been set into place by our collective lack of care or spiritual knowledge, maybe.
Well, again, part of the curriculum here could be that what happens when you take your eye off the ball? What happens when you're apathetic? What happens when you're not paying attention? What happens when you allow your consciousness to be steered by others? What winds up happening? What manifests? Well, what manifests is darkness. What manifests is evil. So that's part of the lesson too. So if you're sleepwalking through your life and not paying attention to anything, then that's one of the consequences. So is that a lesson? In my mind, that's a lesson. So like I said, if you're asleep at the wheel and you allow your consciousness to be steered and all of this ugly, nasty, dark stuff takes place, then, a light bulb should go off in your head and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't allow them to interfere with my consciousness.
Right. It reminds me of, there's a passage in the Bible, couldn't tell you which one it is, but I think there's a reference to the lion laying down with the lamb, and this ideal scenario where all the animals are at peace with each other and there's just love and, tolerance everywhere. And I just wonder if it's ever possible to get back to that kind of state in this realm. I wonder if we'll ever get there.
I don't know. I mean, it goes back to what I was saying before. If this realm is what it's supposed to be, in other words, it's designed to be this way, then think of it as this is just a particular classroom or educational system on a broad portfolio of classrooms. So you could go to a different reality, a different realm, a different incarnation, where the construct is very, very different. So then you could say, okay, well, it got better, so we changed it. Well, no, what you actually changed was you learning. And by your learning, you actually progressed yourself up the ladder. And now if you go into another physical incarnation, you're going to be in a different reality that is very different than this one, much better than this one. But we have to keep in mind that this might be the way it's supposed to be. Trying to change it might not change because that's the class. In other words, it goes back to my calculus biology example before. Can I change a class that's a calculus class to be something other than calculus when it's supposed to be calculus? I don't think so. So I know what I'm talking about right now is could be elusive to a lot of people, but I think about these things, Mark. I know it's a classroom. That I know it is. Okay. This is based upon my work. The question becomes, can you change the curriculum? Or does the change really happen from within you? And when you change, when your soul develops, then things change, because then you're moving on to bigger and better things. You no longer have to participate and no longer have to interact in this particular classroom anymore. I hope that makes sense. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I think about this stuff all the time as well. And I'm amazed that people don't think about these things and spend all their time reflecting on them. But evidently, a lot of people don't. I've got one last question for you. And it's this big one concerning the idea of a soul trap. Yeah. So there's been a lot of talk on the Truther circuit in recent times about this idea that when we pass over, we can get tricked into going into this tunnel of light. And so many near-death experiencers who've come back have said that that's what they saw, a tunnel of light. And they often talk of loved ones who have passed over, who appear to them, and they seem to be beckoning them in. And so obviously it's very tempting to go into that tunnel of light, into what you assume to be where you need to go. But some of these commentators are putting forward the idea that malevolent entities have somehow come up with this construct to trick souls into going into the light. And what happens when you do is that you get spat right back out into this realm. You're reincarnated. You're back on the bloody conveyor belt, like a piece, like a sausage being spat back out, and you have to do it all over again. So this is like the ultimate psyop, isn't it? You spend your life being tricked and deceived by all this psychological manipulation, and now we're told that when you pass over, you got another fucking psyop to deal with, like the biggest one of all. This is an idea that has been gaining some momentum. David Icke, in his most recent book, The Trap, talks about this. It's not an idea that resonates with me. I don't really know what the origins of it are. But what would you have to say about this whole idea of the soul trap?
It's total rubbish. Absolute, total rubbish. The thing is, Mark, people who are talking about this, they're just pulling it out of their butt, okay? I'm just going to be just very frank about this, because for 12 years, I've dealt with this topic. I facilitated sessions, past lives, between lives. And I can tell you right now, your soul transcends this place. You're not trapped. First of all, think about it, Mark. It's a defeatist mentality. It just says, why waste your time basically doing anything, because, you're just caught. What they're saying is that these controllers have absolute control over everything.
Yeah, even beyond life, even into death.
Right, even beyond life. And I can tell you folks right now, absolutely not true. When you pass, there's going to be a light, and that light is going to lead you back home, back to the spirit world. And at times, it could be a family member or members that meet you when you pass away. Other times, most of the time, it's your spirit guide. When you first get there, you're going to have interaction with other souls that have passed on, that were close to you, knew you, could be parents, grandparents, children. And then after that, you go for a life review. And when you have that life review, you're going to go through your entire life, the ups, the downs, and everything in between, and what it is you learned from that life. There is no trap. The only trap is a self-inflicted trap. This is what I talked about before. If you come here and you relinquish and disempower yourself by giving up your will, because what the controllers are doing is they are looking to impose their will on you. And if you don't push back and you don't apply your own inner will, then what's going to happen is it's the one door thing I was talking about before. You're going to pass away, you're going to go up, going to have your life review, and then they're going to say, hey, okay, time for another incarnation, another experience. There's the door. And you're going to say, well, that looks like the last door I went through. You're exactly right. It is the last door you went through, because you have to learn your lessons. And it's not judgment. They're not being hard. There's a process. Your soul has to go through a developmental process.
What if the soul trap idea itself is the trap? And the advice you're getting is don't go into the light because it's a trap and you'll just get spat out, reincarnated, become an energy source for these entities. Go the other way. But what if the advice to go the other way is the trap? Because you should be going towards the light. What if it's a psyop that's designed to even have an effect when we leave these bodies?
Let me explain it this way. Going back to 2009, I had a between live session, and I saw the light. Very, very deep trance. There was this wispy white light. It was a pathway. And in the distance, there was a beacon, like a lighthouse. And it was like 2 or 3 beams of light that were coming out. And when I got to the beginning of the path, like that, I was pulled right in and I was up in the spirit world. This is my own experience, okay? And when I was there, I was shown amazing things, not dark things, nothing that was a trap or any of that. And that's what happens when you pass away. When you pass away and you hit that light, sometimes when you get there, there'll be a void, right? The void is not a bad thing either, by the way. Okay. Sometimes you'll be in a void. And when clients were in the void for a little bit, when they first passed away, I would ask them how they felt. They said, oh, I feel fine. There's no issues. I'm not scared or anything. And in short order, what happens is the light will appear or their spirit guide will appear and then take them to where they need to go, the next stop. So all I can tell you is there is no soul trap. It's a defeatist mentality in my mind. Really what it's saying is reincarnation. The concept of reincarnation is a trap that was constructed by the New Age movement. This is all the stuff they'll put out there, but that's not the case at all. And, whether people want to believe me or not is irrelevant because I know what my experiences have been and I know what I did for 12 years with clients working through spiritual sessions, past life and between life sessions. And I know it's real. I know what they reported back. I know there's a process. And these people who are talking about this, I'd like to ask them a question. What personal experiences do you have where you can stand up and make declarations about how this works or how you think it works? It's speculation. People can speculate. That's okay. But don't go out there with speculation and tout it as factual and scare people because that's what you're doing at the end of the day. You're scaring a lot of people.
Right, because if this soul trap thing is real, it offers zero hope for anything. So you endure a life of suffering and hardship, and then when you pass over, there's just nothing to look forward to, no hope, because you're just going to get spat out and do it all over again. It's a horrific idea.
Yeah. So think about that, right? So, why would you put that out there? Well, because that's the way I think it is. Well, I can tell you right now, that's not the way it is. And I'd like to understand very clearly where you're coming from. And it would be great if it were personal experiences. It would be great if it was based upon doing spiritual regression work and documenting it. Michael Newton, who I spoke about earlier, the book that I read, Michael Newton did 7,000 case studies on past lives and between lives. Michael passed away a number of years ago. And he was a person, he was either an atheist or agnostic when he first started his work. He stumbled upon it accidentally as a therapist, where he was regressing a client in order to understand the beginnings of a particular issue. That's what we would do in hypnotherapy, or psychologists do the same thing. 7,000 case studies. And that was not Michael Newton's conclusions, that it's a trap by any stretch. So that's the thing, Mark. A lot of people, they say things they really don't understand, and they think they understand it, and they've convinced themselves that they understand it because they've been able to put some logic or rationale behind it and construct something. And then they're like, oh, well, that's the way it's got to be. But I can tell you right now, folks, your soul transcends this world.
Well, David Icke having put a book out about it isn't going to help. I've not read that book, but I know that's the basic idea that he's suggesting through it.
Look, David's done a lot of good work, okay? I mean, and David was one of the first people to come on my podcast going back in 2014. And David has put a lot of truth out there. I know some people think he's controlled opposition and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of stuff that David has put out that has been truthful. He's been vindicated, okay?
I wouldn't be doing this work otherwise.
No, but it doesn't mean that everything that David says or anybody says, me or you or anybody, is, etched in stone. That's the way it is. I've always said this, the truth community is a misnomer. It's not the truth community. It's a perspective community. People are offering their perspectives. They call it truth, but it's a perspective. How do you know that what you're talking about is actually true? I mean, in some cases you can. It's provable. Don't get me wrong. But many times what I see in general is perspectives. Now, in my case, I stand behind what I'm saying because, after 12 years of doing this stuff, being an instructor and teaching and having my own experiences, I didn't construct them. These things came from outside of me into me. That's the thing. We're plugged into the ether. That's where expanded consciousness is. It's in the ether. Your brain is not your mind. Your brain, in fact, I think David Icke said this, is a biological computer. He got that right. That's exactly what it is. But this is all so dynamic. It's very complex. And to think that, we can sit here and have it all figured out and all mapped out and all explained, I don't know. Anybody who's telling you they have the whole thing figured out, I don't know. They don't have it figured out. There's a lot to learn, even with all the work that I've done. I don't claim to know all of it. I mean, there's still so much more to understand. Like as an example, the whole thing, is this actually a simulation? I lean that way but I'm not going to make a declaration and say, well, you're in a simulation, because I really don't know. Seems like it to me. Sorry for getting so animated, but I mean, these types of things, because I hear them, they drive me crazy when I hear them.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe we should call it the opinion community rather than
That's
perspective,
right.
because everyone's got a goddamn opinion. You may have noticed.
Yep. Everybody's got an opinion. It's just like what they say, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, Mike, great show. Bit different to the usual. We only mentioned Paul McCartney twice, I think, which is a welcome break. I want to thank you for addressing some very complex questions and giving your perspective on things. I really appreciate your insights because this was an amazing show.
Yeah. Thank you very much for asking me. I know it was a very different show. I've touched on these things before, but not to this degree. And it's going to be very controversial. I know that because, like we said, everybody has an opinion, everybody has a perspective, and everybody has their ties to a specific religion and so on, a belief system. And, for some folks, this is going to resonate. And for others, it's just going to be heretical. But that's okay. I don't care. I don't care. It's like I'm not out here trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm expressing my thoughts, my research, my work, my experiences. That's it. If you don't agree with me, you don't agree with me. It's just the way it is.
What have you got coming up? Did you say you were taking a bit of a break from your work, or have you got some new shows on the way, or is there anything else you want to promote there?
The only thing that I really have in the queue is, I released my big presentation on the Beatles music going back. It's going to be 3 years, believe it or not, this April 1st. Time has really flown by. And so there's been some additional information and research that I have put forth since that presentation was published. And so I'm doing an addendum right now. And so it's basically going to be additional information in support of the original presentation. And I'm hoping to have that out this April 1st. And some folks...
we need to piss off a few more Beatles fans, don't we?
Yeah, well, I've gotten to the point where, I've been at this so long. The pissed off are going to be the pissed off, and it is what it is. But I thought it was important to consolidate the additional information, put it in one place, and put an addendum out. It's really what it is. It's an addendum to the original presentation. So April 1st, again, I picked April 1st because it's April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day is tied to the Fool card in the tarot deck, and Billy plays the Fool because he is the Fool on the hill, right? So just to explain that. And I have another follow-up interview with Crow 777. That's in April. Other than that, I have told my audience that I'm going to be taking time off because at this point, I've reached a point where there's nothing new. It's a bit repetitive. Really what's going on right now is the ticker tape parade with the Beatles and Billy, just showering praise on him. And as his runway gets shorter and he's ready to depart this world. And I really don't want to report on ticker tape stuff. It's not really of that much interest to me. If something breaks that's important, I'll report on it. I have a grandson who's 7 months old now. My wife and I want to spend time with the baby, and we've got things we want to do. And we put raised beds out in our backyard. We put them up in the fall last year. We're going to grow our own food, vegetables and stuff like that. My wife is really good with that stuff. And spend more time with the family. My mother is elderly. She's going to be 88 this year. So, there's other things to do than to talk about, the Beatles, to be honest,
Right. Okay. So, well, Mike, thanks for coming on the show today.
You're very welcome, Mark. Thank you for having me.